Push beyond limits. Rise above the ordinary. Rise beyond limits.
You are not tired, you are undisciplined, and every morning you prove it. You are not tired, you are undisciplined. The alarm rings in the dark, and in that moment, there are two versions of you fighting for control. One version whispers comfort, pulls the blanket tighter, promises you that 5 more minutes will not matter. The other version is silent but powerful. It knows that everything depends on this decision, because this is not about waking up. This is about who you are becoming. Every morning is a test, not of your body, but of your mind. And most people fail before their feet even touch the ground. They negotiate, they hesitate, they surrender. Not because they are weak, but because they have trained themselves to choose comfort over growth. But you are here for something different. You are here because deep down you know that your life is not defined by your potential. It is defined by your discipline. And discipline is not built in comfort. It is built in resistance, in darkness, in those quiet moments when nobody is watching and nothing is forcing you to move. The world is asleep, and that is your advantage. While others are lost in dreams, you have the opportunity to build reality. While they are resting, you are rising. And that difference, repeated every single day, becomes a gap so wide that it cannot be closed. But do not misunderstand this. Waking up early is not the goal, it is the doorway. The real battle begins the second your feet hit the floor. Your mind will search for excuses. It will remind you of your fatigue, your stress, your doubts. It will tell you that today is not the day. That you can start tomorrow, that you deserve a break, and if you listen, you lose, because success does not come from what you do occasionally. It comes from what you do consistently, especially when you do not feel like it. Especially when it is hard, especially when every part of you is resisting. That is where you are forged. You do not build strength when it is easy, you build it when it hurts, when your eyes burn with sleep, when your body feels heavy, when your mind is clouded and slow. That is when your decision matters most, and every time you choose action over comfort, you are rewriting your identity. You are no longer the person who hesitates. You are no longer the person who delays. You are becoming the one who moves, who acts, who executes without negotiation. That is power, and power is not loud. It does not need validation. It grows quietly in the early hours, in the unseen work, in the discipline that nobody applauds. This is where winners are built, not in the spotlight, not in the applause, but in the silence of the morning, when the only thing guiding you is your commitment to something greater than how you feel. So when the alarm rings tomorrow, understand what is truly at stake. It is not your sleep, it is your identity, because every time you choose to rise, you are casting a vote for the person you want to become. And every time you stay down, you are reinforcing the person you are trying to leave behind. There is no neutral, there is no pause, there is only progress or decay, and the choice is always yours. So ask yourself, in that moment between comfort and discipline, between weakness and strength, between who you are and who you could be, who wins? Because that answer will echo through every part of your life, shaping your habits, your results, your future. It will define how you show up, how you work, how you endure, and how far you go. This is not about one morning, this is about every morning. And it starts with a decision that most people are too afraid to make. You are not tired, you are undisciplined. And that truth will follow you into every corner of your life, because the way you start your morning is the way you live your day. Hesitation at sunrise becomes hesitation in opportunity. Delay in the dark becomes delay when it matters most. You do not suddenly become focused at noon if you were weak at dawn. You carry that identity with you. So when you hit snooze, it is not just a delay, it is a signal. A message sent directly to your mind that says you are a person who breaks promises to yourself. And once that pattern is set, it does not stay in the morning, it spreads. It spreads into your work, where you tell yourself you will start later. It spreads into your goals, where you convince yourself there is still time. It spreads into your life, where you accept less than what you are capable of achieving. This is how average is built. Not in one decision, but in thousands of small surrenders that feel harmless in the moment. 5 more minutes, 1 more excuse, tomorrow instead of today, but tomorrow is a liar. It always promises more time, more energy, more motivation, and it never delivers. because the person you are tomorrow is built by what you do today. Not what you plan, not what you imagine, not what you hope for, what you do. So if you cannot control your actions when it is hardest, you will not control them when it matters most. That is why the early morning is so powerful. It is pure, it is unforgiving, it strips away distractions and exposes the truth. There are no interruptions, no noise, no external pressure. Just you and your decision, and that decision reveals everything. Are you driven by comfort or by purpose? Do you move when it is easy, or do you move because you said you would? Are you waiting for motivation, or are you operating on discipline? Because motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes like the wind. Some days it lifts you, most days it abandons you. If you rely on it, you will always be inconsistent. But discipline does not care how you feel. Discipline shows up when you are tired. Discipline moves when you are uninspired. Discipline acts when everything inside you is telling you to stop. And that is why discipline wins, not because it is exciting, but because it is dependable. It turns effort into habit and habit into identity. And once something becomes your identity, it no longer requires force. It becomes who you are. You do not argue with yourself. You do not negotiate, you simply act. That is the level you are building toward, a version of yourself that does not need to be convinced, a version that does not hesitate at the edge of discomfort. A version that understands that pain is temporary but regret is permanent, because one day you will look back and you will not remember how comfortable your bed felt. You will not remember the extra minutes of sleep. You will remember the opportunities you missed, the growth you delayed, the life you could have built if you had just acted when it was hard. That is the cost, and it is a cost most people pay without even realizing it. They drift through their mornings, through their days, through their lives, never fully stepping into their potential. Not because they are incapable, but because they never mastered the small decisions that lead to big outcomes. But you are not here to drift, you are here to take control. And control begins with awareness, with recognizing that every action you take is either moving you forward or holding you back. There is no standing still. There is no safe zone where nothing changes. Everything is shaping you, every choice, every habit, every morning. So when the alarm rings again, do not think about how you feel. Do not think about how much you want to stay where you are. Think about the person you are becoming with that decision, because that is the real consequence. Not the momentary discomfort, not the temporary fatigue, but the long-term identity you are reinforcing. The version of yourself you are building, piece by piece, day by day. And once you understand that, everything changes. The morning is no longer a struggle. It becomes an opportunity, a chance to prove something to yourself. A chance to step into discipline, to take ownership, to move forward when it would be easier to stay still. This is where transformation begins. Not in massive actions, not in dramatic moments, but in quiet decisions repeated consistently over time. Decisions that seem small but carry enormous weight when compounded. This is how you separate yourself, not by talent, not by luck, but by the willingness to do what others refuse to do, especially when it is hardest. And it starts the same way every single day. In the dark, with a choice that most people underestimate, because it looks small from the outside, it looks insignificant. Just a moment, just a decision, just whether you stay in bed or step into the cold air of reality. But what you do not see is what that moment represents. It represents control. Control over your impulses, control over your habits, control over the version of yourself that is constantly searching for the easiest way out. And if you cannot control that, then what can you control? You tell yourself you want success. You tell yourself you want growth, discipline, respect. But those things are not given to you because you say the words. They are given to you when your actions align with your standards, and standards are revealed under pressure. Not when it is convenient, not when you feel ready, but when everything inside you is pushing you in the opposite direction and you still choose to move forward. That is where standards are real. Because anyone can act with intention when it is easy. Anyone can commit when motivation is high and energy is full. But very few can act when they are exhausted, distracted, and uncomfortable. That is the difference. That is the line that separates those who dream from those who execute. And execution is everything. Ideas do not change your life. Intentions do not change your life. Even goals written and planned and visualized mean nothing without action. It is the work repeated daily that builds something real, and the morning is where that work begins. Before the distractions, before the noise, before the demands of the world start pulling you in different directions, this is your time, your space. Your opportunity to set the tone before anything else can influence you, but most people waste it. They give it away to sleep, to hesitation, to the comfort that slowly erodes their ambition. They wake up late, rushed, reactive. They spend the rest of their day trying to catch up, trying to regain control that they never established in the first place, and that becomes their cycle. Wake up late, feel behind, chase the day, repeat. That is not living, that is reacting. And if you are always reacting, you are never leading your life. You are being pulled by it, controlled by it, shaped by forces outside your control. But when you take ownership of your morning, everything shifts. You are no longer reacting. You are initiating. You wake up with intention, you move with purpose. You decide how your day begins instead of letting circumstances decide for you. And that shift, that simple change in direction, starts to ripple through everything you do. Your focus sharpens, your energy stabilizes, your confidence grows. Because you have already done something difficult before most people have even opened their eyes. You have already proven to yourself that you can act without hesitation, that you can override comfort, that you can follow through on your word, and that proof matters. Because confidence is not built by thinking, it is built by evidence. By stacking small wins one after another until your mind has no choice but to believe in your ability to execute. And it starts here, in the dark, in the silence, in the moment where nobody is watching and nothing is forcing you to move except your own commitment. That is where you earn it. Not given, not borrowed, not imagined. Earned through action, through repetition, through the relentless decision to show up even when it would be easier to disappear. This is what most people avoid. They avoid the discomfort, they avoid the effort, they avoid the confrontation with themselves that happens when there are no distractions left to hide behind, because in that moment it is just you. Your thoughts, your habits, your truth, and that truth can be uncomfortable. It can show you the gap between who you are and who you want to be. It can expose the excuses you have been telling yourself, the patterns you have been repeating, the potential you have been leaving unused. But that discomfort is necessary. Because you cannot change what you refuse to face, so instead of avoiding it, you step into it, you wake up and you confront it head-on. You accept the resistance, the fatigue, the doubt, and you move anyway, not because it feels good, but because it is required, because growth demands it, and every time you do, you close that gap. You become a little stronger, a little sharper, a little more aligned with the person you said you wanted to be, until one day that gap disappears, and what once felt difficult becomes automatic. What once required effort becomes instinct. What once felt impossible becomes your standard, but it does not happen all at once. It happens one morning at a time, one decision at a time, one action at a time, and it always begins the same way. With a choice in the dark when nobody is watching and everything inside you is telling you to stay still, and you decide instead to rise. And when you decide to rise, something shifts that most people will never understand. It is not visible at first. There is no applause, no recognition, no immediate reward. The world does not stop and acknowledge your discipline. In fact, it keeps moving as if nothing happened. But something did happen. You kept a promise to yourself, and that is where real power begins. Because the relationship you have with yourself determines everything. If you cannot trust your own word, if you cannot rely on your own actions, then every goal you set becomes fragile. Every plan becomes uncertain, every dream becomes optional. But when you start honoring your word, even in the smallest moments, you build something unshakable: self-respect. And self-respect is not given, it is earned through consistency, through showing up when it is inconvenient, through doing what you said you would do long after the initial excitement has faded. That is what separates those who talk from those who transform, because talk is easy, promises are easy, anyone can say they want more, that they are ready, that they will change. But words without action are empty, and deep down you know it. You feel it every time you delay, you feel it every time you quit early, you feel it every time you choose comfort over commitment. It creates a fracture, a quiet doubt that grows over time, whispering that maybe you are not the person you claim to be, and the more you ignore it, the louder it becomes. Until eventually you stop believing in yourself altogether. That is the danger of inconsistency. It does not just slow your progress, it erodes your identity, but discipline does the opposite. Every time you follow through, every time you act despite resistance, you repair that fracture, you strengthen that belief, you prove to yourself again and again that you are someone who executes. And that belief changes everything, because once you trust yourself, hesitation disappears. You no longer question whether you will act, you know you will. You no longer rely on emotion to guide you. You rely on standards, and standards do not fluctuate. They do not bend to comfort or fatigue. They demand consistency. This is how you take control of your life. Not by waiting for the perfect moment, not by hoping for motivation, but by building a system of discipline that operates regardless of how you feel. A system that removes negotiation, that eliminates excuses, that turns action into default behavior. And the morning is where that system is tested first. Every single day, it is your proving ground. Because if you can win that first battle, if you can step out of bed when everything inside you resists, you set a tone that carries forward. You build momentum that is hard to stop. You create a sense of control that follows you into every task, every decision, every challenge. You become dangerous in the best way, not to others, but to your own limitations. Because you are no longer controlled by them, you face difficulty and move forward anyway. You feel doubt and act anyway. You encounter resistance and push through anyway. That is what makes you different. That is what separates you from the majority who wait, who hesitate, who hope that something will change without them having to change first. But nothing changes until you do, and change is not comfortable. It requires sacrifice. It requires effort. It requires you to let go of the habits and patterns that have kept you stagnant, even if they feel familiar, even if they feel safe, because comfort is deceptive. It feels good in the moment, but it keeps you stuck. It keeps you small. It keeps you repeating the same cycles day after day, year after year, wondering why nothing improves. While discipline does the opposite. It feels hard in the moment, but it sets you free. It pushes you forward. It forces growth whether you feel ready or not, and that is the trade. Temporary discomfort for long-term freedom, or temporary comfort for long-term regret. Most people choose comfort without thinking, but you are here to choose differently. You are here to step into discomfort willingly, to embrace the early mornings, the difficult decisions, the moments that test your resolve. Not because you enjoy the struggle, but because you understand what it builds. It builds you stronger, sharper, unbreakable. And it all begins with that first decision, before the sun rises, before the world demands your attention, before anything else can influence your direction. A decision that seems small but carries the weight of everything you want to become. So when the alarm rings, do not think about the effort it will take. Think about the person you are proving yourself to be, because in that moment there is no audience, no validation, no reward, just you and the standard you choose to live by. And the standard you choose will either elevate you or expose you, because standards are not what you claim when things are easy. They are what you enforce when it is difficult. When your energy is low, when your mind is clouded, when every excuse feels justified and every delay feels harmless, that is when your real standard appears, not in your words, in your actions. And most people never raise their standard because they never confront that truth. They stay in the illusion that they are disciplined, that they are committed, that they are capable, while their habits quietly tell a different story. A story of delay, a story of inconsistency. A story of potential that is never fully realized. But the moment you start telling yourself the truth, everything changes. You stop pretending. You stop negotiating. You stop hiding behind excuses that once felt acceptable, and you start demanding more from yourself, not because someone else expects it, but because you do. That is where transformation begins. Not in motivation, not in inspiration, but in expectation. in the quiet decision that who you are right now is not enough for where you want to go, and you are willing to do something about it. And doing something means acting differently. It means waking up when you said you would. It means moving when you do not feel like it. It means choosing discipline when comfort is calling your name louder than ever before, because comfort will always be there. It will always offer you an easier path, a softer option, a way to delay the effort without feeling guilty about it. It will tell you that you deserve rest, that you have done enough, that you can start later, and sometimes it will sound reasonable. That is what makes it dangerous. Because it does not always come as weakness, sometimes it comes disguised as logic, as self-care, as justification that feels right in the moment but pulls you further away from who you are trying to become, and if you are not aware, you will follow it. You will drift back into old patterns, back into comfortable routines, back into a version of yourself that feels familiar but no longer aligns with your goals. That is why awareness matters. Because once you see the pattern, you can break it. Once you recognize the excuses, you can reject them. Once you understand that every small decision is shaping your identity, you can start choosing differently. And those choices, repeated daily, create momentum. Momentum that builds slowly at first. Almost unnoticeable. You wake up early one day and it feels hard. You do it again the next day and it still feels hard. But something is changing beneath the surface. Your mind is adapting. Your habits are shifting. Your identity is evolving. And then one day you wake up before the alarm, not because you have to, but because you have become someone who does. That is when you know the shift is real, because it is no longer forced, it is no longer a battle, it is who you are, and once you reach that point, everything accelerates. Your productivity increases, your focus sharpens, your confidence expands, because you are no longer fighting yourself, you are aligned, your actions match your intentions. Your habits support your goals, your identity reinforces your direction, and that alignment is powerful because it removes friction. It eliminates the internal conflict that slows most people down. The hesitation, the doubt, the constant negotiation that drains energy before the real work even begins. You move with clarity, you act with certainty, you execute without hesitation. And that level of execution is rare, not because it is impossible, but because most people are not willing to go through the process required to reach it. They want the result without the repetition. They want the outcome without the discipline, but that is not how it works. Everything meaningful is built through consistency. Through showing up again and again long after the excitement has faded. Through doing the work when it is boring, when it is difficult, when it feels like nothing is changing. Because something is changing, you are. Every repetition is shaping you. Every action is reinforcing your identity. Every decision is moving you closer to or further from the person you want to become, and there is no escape from that process. You are always becoming something. The only question is what. So when you wake up tomorrow, understand that you are not just starting your day, you are casting a vote for discipline or for comfort, a vote for growth or for stagnation. A vote for the person you are building or the person you are leaving behind, and those votes add up. They compound over time, creating results that cannot be ignored. Results that reflect not what you wanted, but what you consistently chose. So choose with intention, choose with awareness. Choose with the understanding that even the smallest decision carries weight, because it does, and it always will. Especially in the quiet moments before the world wakes up, when it is just you, your thoughts, and the choice that defines everything that comes next. And what comes next is not determined by chance. It is determined by what you do when no one is there to correct you, to guide you, to hold you accountable, because the highest level of discipline is self-discipline. The ability to lead yourself without supervision, without pressure, without reward, that is rare. Most people perform when they are watched, they rise when they are praised. They push when there is something to gain immediately. But remove the audience, remove the reward, remove the urgency, and they fall back into comfort. That is the difference between interest and commitment. Interest works when it is convenient. Commitment works when it is not. And if you are serious about changing your life, you cannot operate on interest. You cannot rely on bursts of energy or moments of inspiration. You must build something deeper, something stable. Something that does not break when conditions are not perfect. That is discipline. It is the foundation that holds everything together when motivation disappears, because it will disappear. There will be mornings where you feel nothing. No drive, no excitement, no reason to move other than the fact that you said you would. And in those moments, your habits will either carry you forward or your excuses will pull you back. That is why repetition matters, not because it is exciting, but because it is necessary. Every time you repeat an action, you are strengthening a pathway in your mind. You are making it easier to act the next time and the next and the next, until eventually it becomes automatic. But that process requires patience, and patience is something most people lack. They want results immediately. They want to feel different right away. They want proof that their effort is working after a few days, maybe a few weeks, and when they do not see it, they stop. They assume it is not effective. They assume it is not for them. They assume they need something new, but the truth is simple. They did not stay long enough, because real change is slow, it is quiet, it happens beneath the surface in ways you cannot see at first. Your mindset shifts gradually, your tolerance for discomfort increases, your ability to focus improves, but none of it is dramatic in the beginning, it is subtle. And if you are not paying attention, you will miss it. You will overlook the progress, underestimate the growth, and walk away just before the transformation begins to show. That is why consistency is everything, not intensity, not perfection, consistency, showing up even when it feels small, even when it feels like it does not matter. Even when it feels like you are not making progress, because you are. Every single time you act in alignment with your goal, you are reinforcing that identity. You are proving to yourself that you are someone who follows through, someone who persists, someone who does not quit when it gets difficult, and that proof compounds. It builds confidence. It builds resilience. It builds momentum that becomes harder and harder to break, until one day you look back and realize how far you have come. Not because of one big moment, but because of hundreds of small ones. Mornings where you chose discipline, days where you stayed consistent, decisions where you acted instead of delaying. That is how progress is built, and that is why the morning matters so much, because it is the first opportunity to set that pattern, to establish control. To prove that you are not at the mercy of your feelings, because feelings are temporary. They change constantly. They rise and fall depending on your energy, your environment, your circumstances. And if you allow them to dictate your actions, you will always be unstable, always inconsistent, always reacting instead of leading. But when you act based on principle instead of feeling, everything stabilizes. You create structure, you create reliability. You create a version of yourself that can be trusted no matter the situation, and trust is powerful, not just the trust others have in you, but the trust you have in yourself. The certainty that when you say you will do something, it will get done, no matter how you feel, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how long it takes. That level of trust eliminates doubt. It removes hesitation. It allows you to focus fully on execution because you are no longer questioning your ability to follow through. You already know. And that knowledge gives you an edge that most people will never have, because while they are debating, you are acting. While they are waiting, you are moving. While they are hoping, you are building. Day by day, morning by morning, decision by decision, and it all traces back to that first moment, that first choice, the one that seems small but carries everything. The one that defines whether you follow your feelings or you lead yourself beyond them. And when you begin to lead yourself beyond your feelings, you enter a level most people never reach. Because most people are controlled by how they feel in the moment. If they feel tired, they stop. If they feel overwhelmed, they avoid. If they feel uncertain, they hesitate. Their entire life becomes a reflection of temporary emotions, and temporary emotions create permanent limitations. But when you rise above that, when you act regardless of how you feel, you break that pattern. You stop being reactive. You stop being controlled. You start operating from something stronger. From principle, from discipline, from a standard that does not bend just because the moment is uncomfortable. That is where real growth begins. Because now your actions are no longer dependent on conditions. You do not need the perfect environment, the perfect timing, the perfect mindset. You create progress in imperfect situations. And that is a powerful shift because life will never be perfect. There will always be distractions. There will always be obstacles. There will always be moments where everything feels out of place, where nothing flows, where the path forward seems unclear. And if you are waiting for those moments to disappear, you will wait forever. But if you can act in the middle of them, if you can move forward despite them, you become unstoppable. Not because nothing affects you, but because nothing stops you. That is the difference. You still feel fatigue, you still feel doubt, you still feel resistance, but you do not obey them. You acknowledge them and you move anyway. That is strength, not the absence of struggle, but the ability to continue through it. And every time you do, you reinforce that strength. You prove to yourself that discomfort is not dangerous. That resistance is not a signal to stop. That difficulty is not something to avoid, but something to move through. And that realization changes everything because fear loses its power. It no longer controls your decisions. It no longer dictates your actions. It becomes just another feeling, one that exists but does not define what you do next. And when fear is no longer in control, your potential expands. You start taking action where you once hesitated. You start pushing further than you once believed possible. You start stepping into challenges that once intimidated you, because now you understand something most people do not. That the barrier was never the situation, it was your response to it, and now your response is different. Now when things get difficult, you lean in instead of pulling back. When things feel uncertain, you act instead of waiting. When things feel uncomfortable, you push instead of stopping. That is how you separate yourself. Not by avoiding difficulty, but by embracing it. Not by seeking comfort, but by outgrowing it, because comfort has limits. It keeps you in a controlled environment where nothing stretches you, nothing challenges you, nothing forces you to adapt. And while that may feel safe, it also keeps you stagnant. Growth does not live there. Growth lives in the unknown, in the moments where you are not sure if you can, but you try anyway, in the situations where you feel resistance, but you move forward anyway. In the mornings where everything inside you says stay and you rise anyway. That is where you evolve. That is where you become more than you were yesterday, and that process never ends. Because there is always another level, another challenge, another version of yourself waiting to be built. And the only way to reach it is through consistent action, through deliberate effort, through the willingness to keep going when it would be easier to stop. That is the path. It is not glamorous. It is not easy, it is not quick, but it is real, and it works every time without exception, because it is built on something that does not fail: effort, consistency, discipline. These are the tools that shape your life. These are the forces that determine your direction, and they are all within your control. Right now, in this moment, with the next decision you make. Because everything comes back to that, the choice, the moment where you decide whether you move forward or stay where you are, whether you act or delay, whether you rise or remain. And that moment is always closer than you think. It is there when the alarm rings. It is there when the work begins. It is there when the resistance appears, waiting for you to decide. Who you are going to be and who you decide to be is revealed in what you repeat, not what you say once, not what you do occasionally. But what you return to again and again when no one is reminding you, when no one is watching, when there is nothing forcing you forward except your own standard, because repetition is identity. Every action you repeat becomes a pattern, every pattern becomes a habit. Every habit becomes a reflection of who you are, and once something becomes part of who you are, it no longer feels optional. It becomes automatic. That is why your daily routine matters more than your biggest goals, because your goals show you where you want to go, but your routine determines whether you ever get there. And if your routine is built on inconsistency, on comfort, on delay, then no matter how big your vision is, you will always fall short of it, not because you lack potential, but because your actions do not support your ambition, and that gap between what you want and what you do is where most people stay stuck. They dream at a high level, but they operate at a low standard. They want extraordinary results, but they rely on ordinary habits, and those two things cannot coexist. If you want a different life, you must build a different structure, a structure that demands more from you, a structure that removes the option of staying the same. A structure that forces growth through consistency, and it starts with the simplest decision, when you wake up, because that moment sets the tone for everything that follows. If you hesitate there, you will hesitate later. If you delay there, you will delay later. If you surrender there, you will surrender when it matters most. But if you act there without negotiation, without excuse, without hesitation, you create a standard that carries forward. You create momentum, and momentum is powerful. Because once it starts, it becomes easier to continue than to stop. You complete one task and it leads into the next. You stay focused and it extends into your work. You maintain discipline and it spreads into every area of your life. That is how you build consistency. Not by forcing massive change all at once, but by stacking small wins that naturally lead into bigger ones. And it all begins with control. Control over your time, control over your actions. Control over the decisions that most people make without thinking, because most people do not think about their habits. They operate on autopilot. They wake up when they feel like it. They work when they have to, they rest when they are tired, and while that may feel natural, it creates a life that is reactive, not intentional, a life where results are unpredictable. A life where progress is inconsistent, but when you take control, everything becomes deliberate. You wake up with purpose, you move with intention. You act based on what needs to be done, not what you feel like doing, and that shift creates stability. Because now your progress is not dependent on your mood, it is built into your structure. And structure creates freedom, not restriction. Because when your habits are strong, you do not waste energy deciding what to do, you do not spend time negotiating with yourself. You simply follow the system you have built, and that allows you to focus on execution, on improvement, on pushing your limits further each day. That is how you accelerate. Not by doing more randomly, but by doing the right things consistently, and consistency compounds. It builds over time, creating results that seem sudden from the outside, but are actually the product of countless small actions repeated over and over again. That is the secret most people overlook. They see the outcome, but they do not see the process. They see the success, but they do not see the mornings, the early starts, the disciplined choices. The moments where it would have been easier to stop, but someone decided to continue. That is what creates separation. That is what builds excellence. And that is what you are doing every time you choose discipline over comfort. You are building something that most people will never have, a life defined by intention, a life shaped by effort. A life that reflects not what is easy, but what is earned, and it all comes back to repetition. The actions you choose daily, the standards you enforce consistently. The decisions you make when it would be easier not to, because those are the moments that matter. Those are the moments that define you. Those are the moments that determine whether you stay where you are or become who you said you would be, or become who you said you would be even when it costs you, because there is always a cost. Every level of growth demands something in return. Your comfort, your time, your energy, your excuses. Something must be left behind if you want to move forward, and most people hesitate right there. They want the result, but they resist the cost. They want the outcome, but they avoid the process. They want the identity, but they refuse the repetition required to build it. And that is why they stay the same, because transformation is not something you wish for. It is something you pay for daily through action, through discipline. Through the willingness to show up when it would be easier to disappear. That is the price, and the earlier you accept it, the faster you grow. Because once you stop resisting the cost, you stop wasting energy, you stop complaining about difficulty, you stop questioning whether it should feel easier. You understand that it is supposed to be hard. That is what makes it valuable. If it were easy, everyone would do it. If it required no sacrifice, it would create no separation. If it demanded nothing, it would build nothing, but it demands everything: your focus, your consistency, your resilience in the face of resistance, and that is why so few reach their full potential. Not because they are incapable, but because they are unwilling to give what is required. They hesitate when it gets uncomfortable. They slow down when it gets difficult. They stop when it demands more than they expected. But you are not here to stop. You are here to continue, to push further, to go beyond the point where most people quit. Because that is where the real results are, not at the beginning where excitement carries you, not in the middle where progress feels steady. But at the edge where it gets hard, where it tests your limits, where it forces you to decide whether you truly want what you say you want, that is where you separate yourself. Because in that moment there are no shortcuts, no easy ways out, no alternatives that lead to the same outcome. There is only one path forward, through the work, through the discipline. Through the repeated decision to act, even when everything inside you is telling you to stop. And every time you choose to continue, you build something that cannot be taken from you, mental strength. The kind that does not break under pressure, the kind that does not fade when things go wrong, the kind that holds steady no matter what challenges you face, because it has been tested. It has been earned, it has been built through moments where quitting was easier but you refused. That is the strength that carries you forward, not just in the morning, not just in your routine. But in every area of your life, when obstacles appear, you do not panic. When setbacks happen, you do not collapse. When things get difficult, you do not retreat. You respond with the same discipline you built in the early hours. You move forward, step by step, decision by decision, without hesitation, without excuse, because you have trained yourself to do so. And that training shows up when it matters most. That is the real reward, not just productivity, not just progress, but the person you become in the process, someone who can be relied on. Someone who follows through, someone who does not break when things get hard. That is rare, and that is valuable. Because in a world where most people look for the easy path, being the one who chooses the difficult path sets you apart in a way that cannot be ignored. It creates opportunities. It builds respect. It earns trust not because you ask for it, but because your actions prove it, again and again, day after day, morning after morning, and it all connects. Every early start, every disciplined choice. Every moment where you pushed forward instead of pulling back, they all add up. They all build something bigger than any single action could create on its own. A life of intention, a life of control. A life where you are no longer at the mercy of your habits, but the architect of them, and that is where everything changes. Because once you take ownership, once you accept the cost, once you commit fully to the process, there is no going back. You cannot unsee it. You cannot return to the old patterns without knowing exactly what you are giving up. And that awareness becomes your advantage. It keeps you moving. It keeps you focused. It keeps you aligned with the version of yourself you are building, even when the path gets difficult. And it will get difficult. But now you are ready for that because you understand what it takes. And more importantly, you are willing to pay the price, because paying the price is not the end, it is the beginning. Every morning you rise before the world does, every moment you choose action over comfort, every time you push through fatigue and resistance, you are building a life that reflects your standards, not your circumstances. And that is power, not the power to control others, but the power to control yourself, to shape your reality from the inside out. Most people never see this. They wait for opportunity to knock, for inspiration to arrive, for motivation to strike. They think the world owes them alignment, consistency, or clarity, but the world does not care. It gives nothing, and it tests everyone relentlessly. It will crush hesitation, expose weakness, and reward only those who act, even when it is hard, even when it is inconvenient, even when every part of them screams to stay still. That is why mornings matter, because they are pure, they are uncorrupted by excuses. They are a blank page, a proving ground, a moment where the fight is only against yourself. And winning that fight sets the tone for everything that follows. You cannot cheat it, you cannot delay it, you cannot negotiate it. Either you act or you remain where you are. Either you rise or you surrender. Either you enforce your standard or you let circumstance decide for you. And the truth is, nobody else will fight this battle for you. Nobody will wake up for you. Nobody will endure discomfort for you. The discipline, the momentum, the transformation, all of it rests in your hands. So when the alarm rings tomorrow, when the darkness presses around you and the warmth of your bed whispers, remember what is at stake, not your comfort, not your rest. Not the fleeting moments of ease that you could grasp, but your identity, the person you are building. The version of yourself that will determine everything you achieve, every challenge you overcome, every life you impact. Because in the end, it all comes down to this: you are not tired, you are undisciplined, and every morning you rise, you prove it otherwise. Every morning you act, you vote for the person you are becoming. Every morning you choose discipline over comfort, action over delay, identity over excuses. You build yourself into someone unstoppable. You are the architect. Your mind, your habits, your decisions, they are the blueprint. The world does not shape you unless you allow it. You rise, you act, you move forward, and the world follows, not the other way around. And that is the cycle, the truth, the unbroken loop. Every morning begins with this moment, and every night the reflection of it shapes the next. Every sunrise is a chance to enforce your standard, to strengthen your resolve, to continue the work that defines you. Because this is not a single day, a single effort, a single decision. It is every day, every effort, every decision, repeated with unwavering consistency until the person you were yesterday is unrecognizable compared to the person you are today. And that is how greatness is forged. That is how discipline becomes your identity. That is how the life you dream of is created. It starts the same way every morning in the dark before the world wakes, with a single choice. You are not tired, you are undisciplined. Remember this: every morning is a vote. Every decision you make before the world wakes defines the life you will live. So rise, act, discipline yourself when it's hardest, and you will become unstoppable. The world will wait for no one, but you can outpace it. You are not tired, you are undisciplined, and today you choose to rise.